5-inch squares that I know everybody has, and I'm going to show you how to make a little house block today. Now I have also just incorporated a little bit of background fabric, and I've used a white for just up in the corners, but all the rest of the house, the walls and the roof and the door, are made using 5-inch squares. So starting off with a roof, I'm going to have little blue roofs on my houses today, and to make the roof, one 5-inch square makes 2 roofs. So we'll just cut that in half. So you just need to have it cut to 2.5 inches, so exactly in half, so that it's 5 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. So we now have enough there for 2 roofs, and I've already pre-cut my background squares. Now they just need to be 2.5-inch squares. So you could actually use 5-inch squares and cut them into 4, but because I'm wanting a continuous white throughout these blocks that I'm making, I've chosen to use a white fabric, and I'm cutting them into 2.5-inch squares. So first of all, we're going to start off drawing a diagonal line across these little background squares from point to point, and we can do that on all 4. I'm going to quickly make 2 blocks while we're here, because it's kind of easier to make 2. So I'll just quickly draw these diagonals. Now we're going to place these onto the roof rectangles. So I'm just going to lay that one on there, and I can lay the next one ready, and I'm going to pop these through the sewing machine. Now we're going to sew right on that drawn line, so not to one side or anything, just right on that line. And get all my little bits together here. And I'm just going to bring the next one in. 2 roofs have got to be better than 1. Okay, and now take that out, trim off my threads, and now I'm going to place the other square on the other half and sew it so that the points meet at the top of the rectangle. Now when we sew them like this, where there's no overlap, it does mean that we're going to lose that little point. I'll show you that a little bit later. So it's just the way this little house works with these, using the 5-inch squares. So now I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and sew those 2 diagonal lines. We're just about done with our roofs. We've just got to trim away these corners. Now if you were into saving the corners, you could sew another line 1/2 inch away and cut away between the 2, and then you'd have just a small half square triangle trimmed off there. But I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to trim off my triangles. So trim 1/4 inch away from the seam line into that outside area on both lines. And on the other roof as well. This is a great little block. It's very good at using up all the 5-inch squares. There's no waste except for these little corners, and even those you don't have to waste if you don't want to. Okay, now I'm just going to bring the iron in and press those. Now because I'm using a white, I didn't want the seam to show through, so I'm going to lay the white triangle down first and then press the roof over. So there's my little roof. And I'll just get the other one done. Okay, so now I need some walls and a door. So I've got here 2 fabrics that I'm going to use for my walls. But I've got a door inside here, so if it's the same way as we did with the roof for the doors, we would just need to cut that in half, because 1 square makes 2 doors. So 1 square makes 2 roofs, and 1 square makes 2 doors. And then out of the walls, now we've got 3 pieces on the walls. We've got a piece either side of the door, and we've got a piece over the top under the roof. So to achieve that, I've just laid the 2 squares on top because I'm cutting 2 houses. You need 1 square per house. And I'm going to cut a strip off that. So I'm not trimming the square at all. It's a 5-inch square, and I'm going to cut a strip that's 1 3/4 inches wide. Now I'm using my board to line everything up, and I'm going to cut through at 1 3/4 inches. And I actually need 2 of those, so I'm going to cut the next one at 1 3/4 away from that cut line, which is actually at 1 1/2 inches in from this edge, which is exactly what we want, because we want 2 5-inch by 1 3/4 inch strips, and we need 1 1 1/2 inch by 5-inch strip, and that actually is going to go across the top. Now I've already got 2 little bits here that I'm using for doors, and so the door is going to go in between. So now I'll just quickly run those through the sewing machine so that we can see how this little house gets built. So I'm going to take the door and one of the walls, and I'm going to sew them right sides together down the side, just with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I might as well pop the other one through while I'm here. So right sides together. This is the 1 3/4 inch strip to the door, which is 2 1/2 inches wide. Okay, and now I'm going to just pop the other side on as well. So we need the other 1 3/4 inch strip. Make sure it's the same one, with our house kind of likes to match, although yours may not, of course. So just pop the the wall on the other side of the door. Oh, you can tell I'm not a builder. So it's coming together nicely. Definitely quicker than actually building a house, I have to say. So now I'm just quickly going to press those. Now, because these bits are overlapping, I'm actually just going to press one side down, but I'm going to open the other side, and that gives me a nice press, and then I can turn it round and lift up the other wall and just press that so that the seams are going into the walls. Same with this one, seams into the walls. And now we just need to have that little bit that goes above the door, which is this bit here and here. So I'll quickly run those through the sewing machine. I like to press as I go. I find I get a much better result that way. And I like to press from the right side. So. I love little house blocks. I think they're just so appealing, and these fabrics are so delicious. They remind me of little summer houses or boat houses. Okay, so we've got our little top bit of wall above the door, and I'll give those a quick press. So I lay that down and just lift that little bit of top wall and let it press down flat. And the same with this one. And now they need their roofs on. So now same thing, just right sides together, again with our 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you can see there's almost no waste, it's only those corners, and as I mentioned, you could actually save those corners and put another seam line and save them. I've just built 2 houses. How's that? So quickly press the roofs. Now the roof I'm going to lay down first, because there's these little seams that have come in at an angle. They're kind of giving it just a little bit more desire to go that way. I kind of like the fabric to fold the way it's most comfortable going if possible. So we'll just press it that way. And the same with this one. And there I have two very elegant little summer houses. Now you can see that I mentioned earlier that we're going to lose the little point, because we're going to lose that in our seam allowance when we pop a strip or another fabric next to that. But when we take a 1/4 inch seam allowance in, we're actually just going to lose that, and we'll just have a little flat top. But again, I quite like that, and the seam also is going to come in right where the roof point is. I think that's quite attractive, and I love the fact that there's virtually no waste. I'll quickly show you a few of these houses all set out together. I have done a pattern that includes these houses. The pattern shows quite different colours, but I've made a whole little series of little houses, and they've all got blue roofs, but they're not all the same colour walls. Little yellow houses and orange houses and green houses. It's just so delicious. Now you could have a couple of rows of houses. I don't really know how I'd want my houses. I haven't decided yet. But I just thought that was a great idea for using up some of those 5-inch squares, as I mentioned, that everybody has, of course, because you can't really survive without 5-inch squares in life. So that was just a little idea. I have made some little houses in some quite different colours, in some batik fabrics. Where will we put those? I might pop them down the front there. They're quite different looking, but every bit as fun. So you can see all the different colours will work just as well, whichever way you do things. They don't have to be summer houses. These ones have obviously got a nighttime sky and a much darker houses. So I have done a pattern for this, and it's called Houses, using 5-inch squares, and it's available to purchase and download on my site, gourmetquilter.com. But that just gives you an idea of what you can do. So on the pattern, I have done a very small sashing in between with little tiny sashing posts, because I had the night sky. I thought they kind of looked like little yellow stars in the sky. But on this one, of course, I'll be doing something quite different. But there was just another idea for some 5-inch squares.